What is going on to all my White Lotus fans out there, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Elliot, and this is MovieFiles. We are back with our Season 2 finale, Episode 7, which was titled Arrivederci, which means goodbye. As we say goodbye to our season, we say goodbye to one of our favorite characters, and we got so much more to discuss. I'm talking about Ethan and Daphne and what really happened between them, and who was Daphne getting back at, as well as Albie not being a good son, and Tanya, slip and falling. We'll be discussing that and so much more in today's spoiler breakdown review. But before we get into it, if you all haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. That way you can stay up to date with all my daily content. You can also give your boy a follow on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. All those links can be found in the description of this very video. Which, speaking of this video, if you all enjoyed my Season 2 finale review, make sure you're hitting that thumbs up. Make sure you're sharing this review. But more importantly, once you've seen the finale, we got to talk about it, right? Let me know, what did you think about the finale? Pros, cons, everything in between. What did you think about this season as a whole? Favorite moments, favorite episode, favorite character? Which season was better? Season 1, Season 2, and of course, we're talking Season 3 by the end of this review. So let me know, where would you like for them to go? And who would you like to see be a part of the cast? And if you were to pick a character from Season 1 and Season 2, make a return for Season 3, who would that character be? Let's talk about it in the comments below. So before we get into today's breakdown, got to thank you all, number one, who joined us last night. We had a fun watch party, so if you all want to see my live first-time reaction to the episode, you can watch the replay. We had a lot of fun. And then that same night, we had a almost 3-hour live discussion. Myself, D Movie Man, I had people call in and share their thoughts, and that was D Movie Man and Discuss Harley. We had, like I said, a 3-hour conversation about the season, about the characters. It was a fun conversation. Check out that replay. And again, thank you all for joining us last night. And thank you all for watching these reviews for now, 7 weeks. It means the world to me. I appreciate the support. This goes back to covering the show last year to where we are now. I can't thank you all enough, and I really appreciate y'all, and I can't wait for Season 3. But with all that being said, we got to talk about this finale, and there is a lot to go over. And now, after watching it 2 times, I have a change of heart, and we're going to get into that starting now. Full spoilers ahead. As we open this episode with Ethan lying in bed next to his wife and imagining her having sex with Cameron, but in reality, she's just lying there sleeping peacefully. Meanwhile, we switch over to Daphne on the phone with her kids, and notice what the little boy says: "I want daddy." And look at Cameron's face. He looks pissed off, but the question is, why does he look so mad? Now, that face that Cameron gives when he's, cleaning his teeth and he's like upset, to me, and I think we can collectively agree, I think that is letting us know that he knows that that kid is not his and that kid is the trainer. I don't know if he knows who the father is, but to me, that pretty much gave us the answer about if he knew about the kid or not. I think that scene pretty much gave us the answer that he does not, I don't want to say he doesn't like the kid. He's obviously playing daddy to a certain extent, but I think he's just kind of upset with the idea that he is being called dad and he's not really the biological father of Lawrence's, the trainer's kid there. Let me know what you all thought of that scene. I thought that was pretty much giving us the answer that he's fully aware of it. And as we know in this relationship, they're okay with certain things happening and they can just move right past it, as we'll talk about later in this episode. But let me know your thoughts on that scene as we transition over to the lovers, Lucia and Albie, discussing him helping her and maybe she can pay him a visit in LA. All a part of her elaborate plan created from the very beginning of this season. But I'll be honest with you all, if you take a look at this picture here and throughout various points of this episode, she gives us this look when he wasn't even looking at her, kind of indicating that I think, and let me know if you all feel the same way. Do we think Lucia felt bad for what she was doing to that whole family, and particularly Albie? Because again, there was moments in this episode and that very scene I just showed you all, there were looks that she was giving him and just kind of looks she was giving towards the end. Obviously, she was happy as hell, but there was looks of like being like kind of maybe like, man, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, but ultimately she got away with that money. But let me know if you all thought that at one point in this episode or at any point in this season that she felt bad for what she was doing, because again, we'll get into it later, the way that the theme of the season being sex and how characters use sex for whether it was a tool or a way of getting money, I think it plays perfectly into her character. But let me know again, how do you all feel about her towards Albie, and if there was any hint of her actually liking him, genuinely liking him. Let's talk about that in the comments below. But as we move back into the discussion, we get a brief shot of Dom looking through his phone of his photos with his wife and kids as we check in with Tanya, who awakes to Quentin and his crew whispering before she walks in. And very interesting choice of words by Quentin, like having a perfect send-off, and one of his friends even saying the following: "It's a wonderful thing to make new friends so late in life," as we see Tanya not reading the room and paralleling that to what's going on with Portia early on in this episode, questioning where her phone is and missing, and more importantly, she couldn't find Jack on social media. Couple things in those scenes there. Number one, that one guy was almost dropped the ball in saying, so late in life, indicating that her life is soon to end. But we Tanya, she's not able to put two and two together, which again parallels perfectly to Portia. Tanya said it last week. She reminds her of herself younger, and I think it's just like a perfect mirror image of her, but unfortunately one of them don't survive, right? And we'll talk about that later. But I think it was just so interesting seeing these two characters being oblivious to the situation, and both of them just kind of being complicit to not being around good people, in particularly Portia, and knowing that she couldn't find her phone. She knew that Jack took it, and then she also couldn't find him on social media, but yet she just kept going along, and that just speaks to them not speaking up for themselves, which is just, again, an interesting connection between those two characters. But unfortunately, with not speaking up, one of them ends up dead. And we'll talk about that character as we cut to Valentina in her buns of steel, may I add, as she awakes with Mia as one of her employees almost walks in and catches her. And let's just go ahead and kind of dive into Valentina and Mia, because they don't really have the most to do in the rest of the episode. You see Valentina, she fires the piano guy and gives Mia the job, and ultimately she gets the job that she wanted, which she wanted to be a singer. So we get that conclusion. And when I was watching the episode, I'm thinking like, oh man, this kind of feels underwhelming. But the more I thought about it, again, when I watched this on a second rewatch, 3 o'clock in the morning last night, I came to really appreciate this episode and just thinking about the themes and the characters and their parallels and their arcs. And I really didn't like, I liked Valentina's conclusion, because if we all go back to this first episode, I said in those reviews, man, she seems to be kind of one note, one dimensional, very polar opposite of Orman, who was kind of one of the leads of season 1. But as the season went on, number one, that actress was fantastic. And number two, she does not miss leg day, if you know what I mean there. But she really gave me more than when I think the story gave her, because it was just those quieter moments of her being upset about Isabella being engaged to Rocco, and just her being happy with Mia in those opening sequences, and her just opening up to her sexuality and being more pleasant at work. Later on in the episode, we see her smiling at Rocco and Isabella. So I like how I thought she was going to be just kind of maybe way in the background, really not important. But I love the message of just, again, her sexual awakening and her coming into her own. And I would assume moving forward with Valentina, if we never see her again, season 3 or whatnot, I think it's safe to assume that she's going to probably come out and have a girlfriend moving forward, which I think is nice for her. And then paralleling that to Mia's conclusion, episode 1, broke up with her boyfriend, kind of lost, kind of clueless. Where do I go from here? And not saying that this is maybe the best route in the profession that she ended up kind of engaging in with her friend Lucia, but just ultimately speaking to, again, not condoning the actions, but if you want something in life, go get it. Now, again, not condoning her actions because she almost killed the piano guy, but just, again, the idea of let me just try it, right? And she ultimately ended up opening up Valentina. She ended up getting more personality. And again, I thought the transaction between those two, I don't think neither one of them was manipulating one or the other, because we talked about it last night on the stream. Do we feel like Mia was manipulative? I don't think so. I think that they both got something out of that transaction. Again, the theme of this season was sex and what sex did to these characters. And for someone like Valentina, it opened her up sexually and opened her up her personality. And then Mia, it got her the gig that she wanted. So again, no right or wrong answers, but I like how those characters got a conclusion. Let me know how y'all feel about that in the comments below. But time to talk about showing me the money as we cut to Albie cutting straight to the chase with his dad as he tells him he wants 50,000 euros and he thinks of it as a karmic payment. Now Dom is standing his ground and he's like, no, I'll maybe give you 10,000, son. But Albie plays his hand and makes him an offer that Dom couldn't refuse. And that offer is, Dad, I'll help you. If you give me the money, I'll help you with Mom. And it was at this point where they agreed to the terms. And I said to myself, wow, Dom, really? This is what we're doing? But more importantly, Albie, I'm looking at you, Mr. Nice Guy. I've been saying all season, Albie's a nice guy, guys. Give him a chance. No, you pimped out your mom, bro. And we'll talk about the scene when they actually complete the transaction. But the fact that, number one, that doesn't surprise me that Dom took that offer, because he offered that very early on in the season. Like, hey, son, can you help me out with your mom? Put in a good word for your good pops. But more importantly in that scene, the fact that Albie went to those levels to give me the money for I can give Lucia, again, sex, how she used sex to get what she wanted, and he also got what he wanted in return, which was sexual pleasures from her. But also, I think secretly and quietly, this might be a dig from Albie to his dad. Like, I might not be able to get my dad, hit him anywhere else besides his wallet. So I think secretly he's kind of taking a dig, because it's not his money, right, that he spent on Lucia. But again, I don't think that the whole good guy thing, that's thrown out the door, because if you are willing to lie to your mom to get back with your dad, who you know is a cheater and a liar, that speaks a lot about Albie, and I think it speaks a lot to who he's becoming, which is more like Bert and his father. Let me know what you all thought of that scene, and were you surprised that Dom said yes? And Albie is a simp? I think it's 100% clarified in that scene. But as we get back into our breakdown here, I do want to go back and talk about a little bit about Bert and Dom and how really there wasn't much growth or any lessons learned for those two characters, which I will admit, as far as like a negative with this season, those two characters really didn't have much of anything to do. They were just kind of pretty much there. And, y'all saw my reviews. I was thinking that Bert with the Godfather, Mafia, someone's going to end up dying, but that none of that played out. So I will say two great actors, and I wouldn't be surprised if F. Murray gets a supporting nomination for, the Emmys or whatnot. But I was a little underwhelmed by their plot, because it really didn't go anywhere. The only thing I will say about their plot, it was more so they were almost as plot devices for Albie to ultimately become who they are. So I can see how the show used them for that. But, I mean, they're two iconic actors. I was just hoping that they had a little bit more satisfaction, a little bit more of a conclusion to their story. But let's talk about those two characters, and again, Albie, in the comment section as we get back into it with Tanya, who is yet again looking at that picture of Quentin and Greg. As we see Quentin walks in, tells her that was just a picture of Steve from back in the day and wasn't much there to it, and he doesn't know what happened to him, as he continues to lie to her in her face. But more telling is when Mateo walks in and starts crying as he says goodbye to Tanya, which makes me think, why was this man crying so much when he just met her? But then when you think about the situation, I think Mateo knew that this was the last time he was literally physically going to see her, because he knew the plans, which makes me think that Mateo didn't want to be a part of what was going to go down with her. But like, seriously, this man was pouring his eyes out. And yet again, Tanya, read the room. What happened at breakfast? What's going on right now? But unfortunately, she just can't put the pieces together quite yet. But again, that was pretty telling. Mateo crying and her not putting the pieces to the puzzle at that moment. Very unfortunate. As we get back into it, time for the moment of truth, and the question that we talked about last week: did Harper sleep with Cameron? As Ethan immediately says that he knows that she's lying, and he points out that she called Cameron a liar earlier in the episode, calling him an idiot, as we see that she's reflecting this by mentioning the condom that she found on the couch. But this isn't enough, as Ethan continues to call her a liar, and he gets the truth out of her, which according to her, all they did was kiss. Now, y'all was not coming at me, but a lot of you all didn't think that she did anything with Cameron, but it's revealed that they kissed. So the question I have for you all, was it just a kiss? Because again, I'm just thinking of the timeline. When Ethan received that text message on the beach, that was like 10, 15, 20 minutes before he saw the text. So that means that it was probably, and then I would imagine from the beach to the hotel to the room is probably like a 5-10 minute walk. Maybe, I don't know the geography of everything, but let's just say there's like 15 minutes that was unaccounted for, and you just telling me that they kissed in 15 minutes? They're not in high school. They're grown-ass adults. I think something more happened, but hey, It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, what's more important is, even if she said, we kissed, we did this, we did that, whatever she would have said to him, he would have made it even more heightened. I'm referring to Ethan. In his mind, she pretty much is pregnant with Cameron's child, right? It doesn't matter what she say. He's had in his head that there was more that happened, and more importantly, this goes back, and I think it speaks to this next scene that I'm going to break down here. This is just built up tension, anger, hatred towards Cameron to back in the day when they were in college, which speaks to him finally stepping up, getting some cojones, and giving Cameron what he deserved. Let's break down this scene here as we cut back to Harper just ultimately saying to him that the root of the problem is that they're no longer attracted to each other. And yet again, Ethan isn't satisfied with that answer, because again, Cameron tried to sleep with his wife. As we cut to Ethan finding Cameron swimming in the water, questions him for about 2.3 seconds before he ultimately hits Cameron, and he holds him under the water. We see the fight kind of break out. At one point, Ethan's under the water, and then Ethan gets out, and he ultimately gets the last punch, leaving Cameron psychotic ass just smiling and laughing like he doesn't have a care in the world, like he didn't just almost die at the hands of his friend from college. Which, let's talk about this scene here. First and foremost, like I said, I do think it's safe. Number one, let me know if you all thought that one of those characters was going to die in that moment. For a minute there, I'm like, one of them about to die, but then I thought about it, like that wouldn't make sense if they died, because Daphne, episode 1, of this season, it would have been a different, scene if that was the case, if her husband would have died. But anyway, getting into that moment there, I think all that aggression, that pent up anger, all that was just due to what happened to Ethan in college. I like a girl, Cameron sleeps with a girl, but this is more than just a girl. This isn't a girlfriend, a crush, a fling. This is his wife. So he took it to those levels of punching him, putting him under the water, and seeing that moment, man, I thought that was a really great scene. I felt the tension, I felt the aggression, I felt the intensity there between those two. And again, pay attention to Cameron's reaction. Smiling, laughing. The man's psychotic. And again, this goes back to Theo's performance. And there's a lot of great performances in the show, but he played cocky, arrogant, charming, suave really well, man. Like I've never really been like the biggest fan of him. Nothing against him. I think the roles he chooses is just not suitable for him as an actor. This really opened my eyes to him as an actor. And also Will Sharp, he's great in this scene too. So let me know what you all thought about that. Did all that anger built up result into Ethan damn near killing Cameron? And did you think he was going to actually kill him in that scene? Let's talk about that as we get back into it with Portia and Jack, as she see Jack leave his phone at the table, which leaves it to Portia calling Tanya, and they have the conversation, which, by the way, Quentin mentions that there is terrible reception on this part of the water, which I thought was interesting, as Tanya finally tells Portia what she saw between Jack. And by the way, when she's describing it, like, they were naked and doing some things, and Portia's like, what things were they doing? Well, they were kind of, and I don't want to get this video demonetized, but they were kind of doing what. Put that on a t-shirt. Like, Tanya, some of the best lines were in this episode. I thought they were hilarious. But getting back into the discussion, as we see Tanya was talking to herself on the phone, because it finally clicks. Tanya puts the damn pieces of the puzzle together. It's the prenup, and everything that's happening is due to Greg and Quentin working together, as Jack ultimately grabs the phone, and we see Tanya has to pretend to be on this boat with her potential killers. Again, it's very important to mention conversation. It was almost as if Tanya was talking to her younger self as they're trying to figure out what's going on. First, Portia says, I don't feel good about this. And when she said that, we see Tanya kind of, in that Rain Man moment in her head, she's putting all the pieces to the puzzle together. She realizes Greg, prenup, Quentin, pitcher, cowboy, I got to get the hell out of here. So I really did like that scene. I love that Tanya finally clicked, man. She's so oblivious to everything, but I like that she finally figured out what was going on at that moment, and that they have to get the hell out of here. Really appreciate that scene. Let me know what you all thought of that. But we got more to discuss here. Getting back into it, you see Ethan runs into Daphne on the beach, and probably one of the best lines of this entire season, and one of the best moments of this entire season of not being a victim. We see Ethan goes ahead and talks to her about what he just found out, and the response from Daphne was amazing. As she thinks about what just learned, she's processing everything. And take a look at this picture here, from going from processing her husband yet again cheating on her, to her getting the moment of I'm not going to play victim. What an Emmy-worthy performance and moment there as we see that she looks off in the distance. She tells him nothing to worry about, and who really knows their partner, and you don't have to know everything to love someone. She goes on about prizing herself and do what you have to do not to be a victim and use your imagination. She then takes Ethan on a walk to that very same location that Quentin was talking about the woman being dragged out of her house, being killed and all that stuff. And then they go off to the distance. And we're left as an audience to wonder, did something happen between those two? I have my thoughts on this scene. And again, I want to just point out, I've been praising, Aubrey Plaza. I just talked about Theo. I'm a big fan of Lucia. I talked about Valentina's performance. Everyone's great in the show, right? There's no questions about that. Megan Fahey, I believe is her last name. This is my first time ever watching Megan on anything, TV, movie, or whatnot. Oh my goodness. This woman in that scene, phenomenal. And talk about Emmys, please give her a nomination. And if she can win, I'll be happy for that. Because that scene to me, again, just replaying that scene, her processing the information, her coming up with that answer of not being victim, use your imagination, and do what you have to do to be happy. We know what she did with Lawrence and having a kid. Who knows if that other kid is his, but that performance and that scene to me was the scene stealer besides what happens to Tanya, which was so shocking. But as far as like execution goes and the performance goes, oh my goodness, that scene was fantastic. But again, my thoughts of the scene: kiss, have sex, have oral sex, something happened between those two. And I actually think about this scene, as you all can see on the screen now. Remember this from the opening sequence. I was thinking that was Lucia and Albie the night that they first hooked up. But now I'm starting to think that this image that I just showed you all was actually what happened between Ethan and Daphne. So I definitely think something happened between them, because if you also think about this scene, Ethan's getting payback for two characters. Number one, this is payback for Cameron. All those years you took my girlfriend and you kissed my wife, that's as far as he thinks things went, and probably a little bit further. But now I'm getting back at you, and I'm going to get something from your wife, but also getting back to Harper, getting payback there. But I want to talk about Daphne in this scene, because I think at face value, we think that this is her getting back at her husband, and they play those, tennis mind games, those acrobatic mind games with each other of toxicity. I think, in watching it 2 times now, I think that her doing that with Ethan, whether again it was oral sex, quick little quickie, or them making out, whatever, I think that was payback for not her husband, but that was payback for Harper. Now, I say that because thinking back to when Harper and Daphne had their girls trip, I think that Daphne thinks that they're bonded, because she told Harper that I don't really hang out with girls because they're catty, they're liars, I don't get along with other women. And then she goes on to tell her, when Harper approaches her about, I think Cameron and my husband cheated on us, and she confided in her and she showed her a picture of her child that isn't Cameron's. I think that she really thought that they bonded and they became good friends. But then to find out that Harper made out or did something more with Cameron, I think that Daphne was getting back at Harper. Let me know what you all think about that scene. But it was probably my favorite scene of the episode. And again, Megan Fahey, fantastic performance. And that scene was great. As we got more to break down here, we head into the night. And of course, Cameron sees Harper and Ethan eating and decides to sit next to them after everything that happened. But I want you all to pay attention to Ethan's demeanor. Because again, all of last week and most of this week's episode, he was on edge. He was ready to explode until he had that scene with Daphne, which again makes me think that something happened between them, because it was almost like all that bent up tension was relieved by Daphne. And to top this scene off, we have a speech from Cameron talking about he's so happy he met Ethan in college and he finally got to meet Harper, and he has a smile on while doing this, while meantime Harper and Ethan are complete opposite of them. But I think, again, it's so important to realize how these characters use sex, whether it was Ethan and Daphne having sex, whether it's Cameron and Daphne, how they use sex in their relationship and how they use sex with other people to get pleasure, but then they go home with their loved ones. I think we see in this scene both Ethan and Harper looking at maybe we should try what they're doing, because it seems to be working, and we'll talk about them at the end of this episode. But I think at that scene there, I think they want to adapt, and they got a piece of them. I'm referring to this couple, Harper and Ethan, getting something from that couple and maybe becoming them in the future. I think there's a lot to be said in that scene. As we get back into Karmic transaction being complete, Albie tells them that he loves his grandfather, he loves his dad, as the money is transferred to Lucia's account. And also, I mind you that Cameron also gave her money, so she is locked and loaded and happier than ever. Now it is time to talk about the slip and fall. As we see back on the boat, Kilo has arrived and he has a mysterious black bag. As we cut to Ethan and Harper questioning what next, as all of a sudden Ethan has his sex drive back on and he is, for the first time all season, getting intimate with his wife. Again, I don't think it's a coincidence that he's finally opened himself up, as we find out that he probably did hook up with Daphne, and I think that their whole pretending to be happy was all broken down because they got a taste of Daphne and Cameron, and now they're trying to live that more open relationship lifestyle, hence why Ethan's finally able to have this sexual awakening with his wife. So very interesting stuff there. But we conclude this episode with Jack and Portia's plot as they arrive to the airport, and as he tells her not to go back to the hotel, just leave, because these are some very powerful people. Now, a lot of you mentioned in last night's live stream that you all thought that it was intended for Jack to kill her, but he ultimately decided not to. And watching the second time, definitely he was going to kill her, or maybe someone from the mob was going to do it. But let's go ahead and talk about Jack and also Portia, because Jack was okay. Again, kind of like Bert and Dom, he was just a plot device to distract her, to get her, away from what was going on with Tanya. But in all seriousness, I'm appreciative of Jack ultimately not going down that path and letting her go, and ultimately giving her a chance to live out her life, because as I had mentioned, Portia and Tanya are so similar. Speaking of Tanya, unfortunately, she doesn't continue to live her life. Whew, let's break down this scene here. But again, Jack, shout out to you for being nice and giving her phone back and letting her live. But someone that doesn't live is Tanya, as she locks herself in a room first as Quentin tries to get her out, leaving Nikki low to breaking down the door, only to get shot and killed. As we see, she proceeds to shoot blindly. She shoots Quentin, she shoots one of his friends, and the only question she has for Quentin is if Greg was having an affair. As we see, the boat skipper jumps off the boat. We see one of his friends ultimately swims to the shore, which I don't know if those characters made it to the beach, if the captain made it or if the friend made it. But now the moment that I think a lot of us either was happy, sad, or just confused as hell about, Tanya proceeds to go and the side of the boat. She wants to get on the smaller boat from Nikki Lowe. Instead of her taking the stairs, which I mind you, ladies and gentlemen, was literally feet away. She could have literally just took a couple steps, walked down the stairs, and got to the boat. But instead, and again, I guess the way I'm rationalizing it, the adrenaline's rushing. She almost died. She's not thinking, and we also know she's not the brightest bulb in the toolkit there. She gets on the edge of the boat. She's hyping herself up. You can do it. You can do it. She ends up slipping and falling, hitting her head, drowning in the water, which again is just so crazy. And the more I think about it, and on a second rewatch, it is such a Tanya thing to do. This is so on brand for her character, but also just looking to the deeper metaphors and connections. I think there's a lot to be said about how in season 1, we remember that she was there in Hawaii to let her mom's ashes be in the ocean. And I think it's interesting that she ended up dying in the ocean. So there's a little bit of connective tissue there, but also not ignoring the signs that we got this season that it was going to be her that ended up dying. Number one, we think of, I mentioned earlier, Valentina's comments about her favorite actress, Monica Vici, dying and being dead. And now we ultimately see that she died. You think about the fortune teller giving her the fortune that she didn't want to hear, which was probably, you're going to die. And then also the opera that she went to, Madame Butterfly, which again, I've never seen the opera. I know there's a movie about it. It's a very, well-told story and lore and all that stuff. But I do know from when I researched that episode that Madame Butterfly ended up dying tragically. So I think it all kind of comes together that ultimately it was going to be Tanya that ended up dying, which we ultimately see that it was her. But more importantly, we go back to the reveal from the very first episode when we saw Daphne finding that body, that it was indeed the body of Tanya, and the rest rest of the bodies were guests because, again, Quentin was a guest at the hotel, and they find the rest of the bodies on the ship, which, again, did his friend make it to shore that jumped over and swam? Did he drown, or did the captain drown? I'm very curious on if those two are still alive. But the question at hand, ladies and gentlemen, again, let me know what you all thought about Tanya's death. Was it fitting? Was it just too ridiculous for you, and how she ended up killing all those people? Let me know your thoughts on that. But the question, Greg, are we assuming that Greg now has the money, the prenup happened, he has the video footage if he wants to prove that she cheated on him, and we're assuming that he now has the money and gets off free of charge? He doesn't have to split the money with Quentin. Was he even on the phone with Quentin telling him that he loved him? Who was really leading the charge? Was it Greg? Was it Quentin? And we were left up with our own thoughts. So a couple things here, and we'll talk about it later when we talk about my thoughts of season 3. But Mike White said, I watched a little after the show thing, he said that the Greg situation might be addressed in season 3, which I hope it is addressed, because he had said, the police are involved, and not to, leave out the fact that if Tanya has anyone that cares for her in the world, family members, she's a pretty rich individual. So I would imagine that someone might hire like a PI to investigate what happened to her, but also a mafia member died, Quentin and his friends died. So I would imagine there's more to that story, and people are going to investigate more and eventually maybe connect it to Greg, which I'll share my thoughts on how that can work in season 3. But let me know how you all felt about that whole situation and not really getting all the answers. And ultimately, on a second rewatch, I actually kind of like that being left open and hopefully maybe addressed in season 3. But I know last night when we were on the live stream, a lot of us were disappointed by the lack of answers being, the questions being answered. But let's talk about it 24 hours removed from the episode. How do you all feel about the Greg, Quentin, Tanya dying situation? In the comments below. Let's wrap up this episode here as we end with Lucia looking at Albie one last time because she walks away richer than she was at the start of this episode. We head to the airport. We see our happy married couples as we see Bert, Dom, Albie all looking at a beautiful woman, which just to me symbolizes that Albie's now a part of this 3 generations of masculinity and toxicity as Albie catches up with Portia. And he tells her about the bodies that were found, and she pretty much knows that one of those bodies was Tanya, but there's nothing she can do about it now as they exchange their horrible stories of her time with Jack, his time with Lucia. They ultimately exchange numbers in their phone like nothing ever happened as we see Lucia and Mia happy as can be as the best things in life are free plays, as it is revealed that Lucia, so-called pimp, was really her friend, and at the end of the day they end up winning. So again, to just summarize the winners of this season, and again tying it to what sex did for characters and how sex was used as a tool, Lucia won, Mia won, and Greg won, right? So it's very interesting to see those characters, and I would definitely say Greg, out of those 3 characters, that one was probably the worst of the 3 as far as like a human being goes, because ultimately that got his wife killed, and he planned on getting her killed. At least that's what we're assuming to be. Where on the other side, Lucia and Mia, no one was harmed except the piano guy. But besides that, it was just, she pimped him. She pimped the whole thing out. She was a sweet girl, and she got Albie. She played him. But also, Albie, the maturity on this kid now, and not giving him any props, but he was like, yeah, I got played, which to me just symbolized that he is now going down that path of his father and his granddad. Like, yeah, it happened. I'm going to move on. And matter of fact, hey, you want to exchange numbers? To me, that pretty much says that that whole good guy act is now thrown at the table, especially what he did to his mom. But again, overall, y'all, as far as this season goes, I think personally I prefer season 2 over season 1 for many different reasons, but just to summarize it, I think it was darker, more intense, it was more drama filled. It had some comedic beats, but season 1 was more of a satire comedy, and this was more of a serious drama. I think that this season to me just hit on a much deeper level in the way that the theme, and Mike White said it himself in the after show, that season 1 was more about money and how it affected our characters, and season 2 was more about sex and how these characters use sex, and again, some of them use it as a tool, some of them use it as a way of, quenching their desires, but ultimately sex was something that really shaped this season, and not corrupted, I guess, well, corrupted would be the word, because we saw what sex did to Albie, we saw what it did to Mia, and we saw what it did in a good side for Valentina, so sex can be used as many different ways in this season, but ultimately, I do prefer this season over season 1, which I love season 1, but I ultimately think that season 2 was just a better season, and that brings me to my thoughts on favorite characters. It's a three-way tie right now because Harper, I love Aubrey Plaza. I really thought she was great in this season. I talked about Daphne, and Megan Fahey was fantastic. And also, I was a big fan of Lucia and also Jennifer Coolidge. Can we give her a moment of silence for R.I.P. to Tanya, which now brings me to my thoughts of season 3. If we are to assume that the Greg situation would be a continuing storyline, that is a way to continue Tanya having a presence in each season, because obviously without Tanya, we wouldn't have Greg. So I would think, and based off of Mike White saying that he would like to have season 3 explore Eastern culture and religion, and also that he would want season 3 to really focus on a satire of how people view death, I can see season 3 being somewhere maybe in Singapore, which would be great. Greg's on vacation with whoever he was on the phone with saying, I love you, but he's on this vacation, richer now because he has all that money, but I think that he's going to have someone investigating him while he's on this vacation, and maybe that investigator is going to end up falling in love with someone on vacation. Meanwhile, Greg's on this vacation because he knows he's going to be dying sooner. If this whole thing that he was dying is true, he's on a trip with his money, with his lover, and he is going on a final vacation, but he's also getting investigated for what happened with Tanya. So that's what I'm thinking season 3 might tie into, and again, a vacation of death, but also not trying to get caught might be something we might explore. But that's my thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, on the finale, on the season 3, and which season I preferred. But I thank you all for the support on all these videos, watching the live stream like from last night, watching all these reviews, and trust me, when season 3 comes around, we're going to be covering this show a lot more. And I might actually add after shows to each episode as something that we do on a weekly basis on top of the breakdown. So I appreciate y'all. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you enjoyed my coverage. I will be covering other shows and movies as we do. This week alone, we'll be talking Avatar 2, Babylon, Knives Out 2, and many other things. So keep subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of that content. Many more shows to cover by the end of this year and also the top of next year. Many more things to come. But before we wrap this video up, if you could do me a favor to let me know you're still here supporting the video, put in the comments right now, hashtag RIP Tanya. So again, before we wrap up, just a friendly reminder, as you can see on the screen now, to like, share, comment, subscribe. You all have been awesome. As you can see on the screen now, come and join the community. Check out all my coverage for the White Lotus. Check out my most recent review, and we'll catch you all on the next breakdown.